Hello, and welcome to another episode of Digging a Little Deeper into English with Kirsten, where we will investigate what successful language learners have done in order to transform their communication and make that career change they were looking for. It's been a while since my last episode, but I have a really inspiring conversation today with one of my connections on LinkedIn. I found his story so profoundly interesting, and I am sure you will too. So let's get started. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with me. Can you introduce yourself to everyone and tell me a little bit about your background?
Hi, I'm Ishak Karim. It's hard to pronounce, but if you're in the Middle East, it's nothing. It's very easy. But even the Malaysians cannot pronounce my name correctly, unfortunately. I've been in this industry, which is focused on semicon for close to 30 years now,
Mm,
doing a lot of things, and been working in Europe and the US, and obviously in Asia, in various sector or subsector of the semiconductors.
excellent.
Now I'm working on the not really semiconductor per se, but working on material which is the tiny mini wires that's used in semiconductor packaging.
Mm.
I'm Malaysian, obviously. Many people ask me whether are you really Malaysian? Yes, I am, born and raised.
And they
Um,
can't see you in this podcast, and your accent is quite neutral, so they may not guess. But yes,
yeah,
Malaysian.
yeah.
And you're working
Thank
back in
you.
Malaysia now.
Currently, I'm back in Malaysia. Yes. I don't think that I'm going anywhere at the moment, but I still keep that option open just in case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. Excellent. And you did mention, but I know that you've spent quite a lot of time working in the States
Hmm.
as a professional. And so obviously that was in English. When did you actually start to learn English? And what was your English like when you arrived in the States?
That is interesting. And then if you look at in Malaysia, we start learning English since first grade, equivalent to American first grade, which is we call it Standard One here in Malaysia. But since I grew up in the rural area, nobody speaks English. Even the English, unfortunately, was taught in Malay, which is kind of weird, but that's how it is. Um, I couldn't speak a single word of English until I stepped foot in the US, which
Wow,
is at that time I was about 20 or 21 years old.
terrifying.
Terrifying because before that, when I was admitted to college, which is 3 years or 2.5 years before, I went through very how should I say it? Very intensive English course.
Okay.
It's starting from 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, 6 days a week,
Wow, that's
doing
intense.
nothing but English. Even so, after 2.5 years, I still couldn't speak a single word, even though I did understand almost every communication words. Then I was preparing for engineering. Obviously, the engineering word is not that difficult to understand anyway, because you don't
Mm,
really have to speak the full sentence. But
mm.
the first time I really spoke full English was at the airport when I want to check in to the next flight, continuation flight from LA to DC. And that was really, either say like, if I didn't speak a word now, I'm dead because I can't communicate any other way anyway. That's one thing. The second thing is back then, the American is not like the British, probably Australian is the same, that they don't accommodate for those with a funny accent like what I did back then. They're having a hard time understanding them. They say,
Okay.
what did you say? Can you say that again? Oh, excuse
Yeah.
me. Oh, pardon. I have to go through this almost every day until it comes to the point that I say, wow, I need to do something. Yeah, I need to do something
Interesting. I
really.
mean, I think Australians are really tolerant with accents because we're a
Mm.
culture of immigrants. Like
Yeah.
there's not a great deal of, white Australian only areas. It's
But American in the US back
a
then,
lot of
I'm
immigrants.
sure it's still true now that they're very particular because Americans sounds just Americans. Yeah,
Mm.
they don't have accent per se. Even if they do, yeah, African American has their own a bit of twist, and then
South
people in the
America,
South has a bit of
yeah,
twist.
like
But they're
Texan. And,
still American. For
yeah,
them, even the African American accent is sometimes it's quite hard to understand, but
yes,
because probably they got used to it,
yes,
they can accept it as part of the American English. But for us who just learn and come from Asia, our English is completely different. We stress at the wrong place, for example, and our
yeah,
grammar is not perfect, and that make it a little bit more difficult for them to understand. Therefore, for me to really understand or communicate well with them, I really have to mimic. That's where I picked up my accent because I really have to mimic how they pronounce every single words.
yes,
Sometimes I mispronounce as well because I do have my own accent as well. And
yeah.
certain difficult word is sometimes it's very difficult because you don't know how to pronounce it correctly. You think
Mm.
you did, but obviously you don't.
Well, it's interesting because the same happened to me in Malaysia. In the workplace, if I tried to, and I did on occasion,
Mm,
I can understand Malay, but
mm.
I don't speak it very well. Um,
Yeah, but your excuse pretty much, right?
well, I had to speak in English. I was working for an Australian company, and my job was to communicate in English, and
Mm,
it's very,
yeah.
very natural to speak in
Mm,
English. So there wasn't a lot of pressure or encouragement for
mm,
me to speak in Malay. But on occasion, I tried. And
mm,
but the poor people were just
mm.
staring at me like I have no idea how what she said, and how do I tell my boss that I didn't understand what she said if they're so polite? So
Yeah.
I gave that up pretty quickly.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
but pronunciation is really important.
Yes, exactly.
So my next question was going to be, what was the biggest challenge?
Mm.
And I'm now sensing that you've already answered that. Speaking and pronunciation. Was it fear of speaking? I mean, how did you feel when you spoke and you were not being understood?
Most of the times got frustrated because I can't do any better. I couldn't speak any better, even though I wish I could.
Mm,
I try to do my best to mimic as close as possible. I think that is a challenge when you learn the language at 21 years old.
yes.
But if you were learning the language like my kids, when we moved to the US and my elder was only 3, and then my second daughter at that time, she was just 3 months old.
Mm,
And to them, after 3 months or so, then they can just speak like the native. They can pick up everything like the native. But for me, even until today, I don't really declare that I really good in English because I still have some part of my brain or whatever doesn't develop anymore to go to make it better in terms of pronunciations. And that's one thing. The second thing is um, when return to Malaysia, then I have to mimic the local accent, which is quite a challenge for me myself because I have to tone it down or dilute it a bit with that accent to make sure that the local understands me.
you
Um,
speak in English.
yeah. Speaking Manglish, which is I don't. I try, but it doesn't sound natural. It sounds like so fake that I myself kind of embarrassed to speak Manglish or Singlish. I can't do that.
I can speak in
Yes.
English very well.
Oh, you do? Good.
I, but I have to make sure when I'm, helping people improve their English
Yeah.
to leave
Yeah.
them English. That's
Mm.
because my husband's Malay. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, we speak English a lot.
It's
So
good.
how did you overcome the pronunciation issues that you were having?
How did I come pronunciation
Hmm.
issues?
They're really easy for me
I
to understand now.
I was working on the first few months because American students have to work to survive. Not to mention that living in DC is already very expensive.
Mm.
Then I start working like the second month or the third month, and I work in the one of the departments as a, they call it student aid. It's basically
Mm.
office boy. Well, that's the name for it, but they call it student aid. Um, I had a office manager who's at that time she was pursuing PhD in English.
Ah.
She's pure American, yeah? And then she looked at me and saying, "You need help in terms of your English." She said, "Your English is not that bad, but it could be better." And every time that she listened to me on the phone, because I spent a lot of time answering the call from
Yeah.
the students, and then she listened to the way I speak, and then she always say, "No, that's not how you say it. This is how you say it." And then she start like, like we're reading Quran, right? Then we
Yes.
have to pronounce the Quran where the word, the air should come up from, and then where, she teach me
Yeah.
everything and how to pronounce it, where to stress, and then
Yeah.
how to roll my R. Uh,
Yeah.
a lot of aspect of American English that she teach me. Then I try to mimic as much as possible. It
Yeah.
felt so fake at that time. Even my
Mm.
friend was saying, "Oh, you've been here, it's only 3 months, but you start sounding like them already." I said, "What can I say? I have to do it. Else, my boss didn't like me to use my
Yeah.
own accent, and then the student that I serve would not understand me because they're all American, pretty much." So I had no choice. I really have to leave my friend out, and I really have to speak whatever the way I was taught to speak rather than follow them.
But it's
The good
awesome
thing
that
for me
you
is
had a
I don't have
mentor.
the good thing is I don't come as a Manglish. That is
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
for me
Yeah.
because I did not start as Manglish. Therefore, if I were to start with Manglish, probably would have been a bit more difficult to switch.
Yes. Yes, it is. I work with quite a few Malaysians. My husband's Malaysian, and
Mm,
I think it's harder to learn English as Manglish and then have to learn proper English afterwards.
yeah.
I think that that's really quite a difficult transition.
Mm. My challenge still, though, to be honest, when it comes to the perfect tense. For
Ah, yes.
example, if I were you, I would have done this. If
Ah,
I were you, I could have done this. I tend to use a
conditional
simple tense.
statements. Yeah.
Tend to use a simple tense or past tense, which is it's still that's one thing. The second thing that I forgot to mention,
Mm.
this really happens to me because the Malay did not have the gender, right?
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
English does have a gender.
yes.
I was at work and then I was talking to one of my operators, and then I was talking about my wife,
Mm-hmm.
but I was using he
Mm,
instead of
mm,
she.
mm-hmm.
And then she looked at me and saying, "Really? You're talking about your wife?" And then it clicked to me. Then say, "Oh my God!" She thought I was gay.
Yeah.
And then since then, I was super careful about gender, and that I really want to make sure that if I see he, I really meant a female. Of course, now it's a lot of other genders. So it's quite
Yeah, yeah,
complicated.
yeah,
But
yeah.
back then, that was really the moment that really, struck me and saying, "Remember this, remember this." So
Yeah, that shame or embarrassment is a very good
exactly,
lesson, a very good
learns in the
lesson.
hard way, but that's the only way, perhaps, yeah. Else I would have still confused with a she and a he, even
Yes,
until today.
definitely.
The other thing that probably something that you may not have experienced it, that many Malays speak English in Malay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you
Translation worked.
translate verbatim and then actually you are speaking Malay but in
Yes.
English.
Yeah, English words.
Uh,
Can or not. How many
yeah,
times people
because you say
say can or
boleh or
not?
tak boleh, then you say can or not. Because but in English, it's no such thing, right?
No, is
So
that possible?
that is
Yeah.
the challenge to some people, especially when I was in the US. I had an Indonesian friend who speak in English in Indonesia
Mm.
somehow, and then he's having hard time understanding, communicating with anybody.
Yeah, okay.
because they literally translated from Indonesian, and the word that came out really funny.
Yes. And so, how did you find living in the West, other than language? Language is obviously something that you had some help with early on, but communication is more than just
Yeah.
words and grammar.
No, my challenge back then was obviously I grew up in the village. I
Mhm.
haven't met anybody other than my relatives and my friends.
Yeah.
And then converting almost immediately in the US, um, it was really a shock, because
Yeah.
the very first shock was on the plane, because we Malaysian used to see beautiful stewardess serving us, but as soon as you
Mhm.
get to the American Airlines, then the auntie is with no particular shape or figures,
Yes.
and then serve us and saying, "Wow, that is different.
Yeah.
That is completely different." And of course, the weather is one thing. We always hot, and then DC is a fall season, but not the winter. Is not so bad, but still, have to get used to it.
Yeah.
It's not as I think it's not as bad as Manchester. Manchester,
Oh,
well, the
yes.
weather is really
Freezing.
horrible. But DC weather is quite mild, I would say.
Hmm.
Then dealing with international
Mm.
community.
This is where I
Even though he's an
interested.
American,
Mhm.
but there's a melting pot of people from all over the world. And then for you to say, hey, I can treat them as pure American is not correct.
Mm.
Because even though they are Americans, they still follow their culture. If they're Pakistanis, they're still Pakistanis.
Mm.
If they're Egyptians, they're still Egyptians. I
Mhm.
remember I have a friend who's Egyptian that time. Then I thought, I can speak to him like Americans, but
Oh,
he's still Egyptian. He's still very, very, you know, sensitive. I think probably just
yes.
him. That's quite sensitive. And something I said, especially, something lenient about religious discussion, and then he wasn't happy with that. He said, "How come you, as a Muslim, you had a lenient view as opposed to a very strict view?" Now I really have to be careful on that and start learning the character of the people around me.
Mm.
Then I work with the company, not really a company, but a group of veterans from the army and navy. Those people,
Wow.
um, they are all literally and also mentally they're
Yeah.
all there.
Yeah.
They're retired. But then I was early 20s at that time. Then
Mm.
for me to fit into the organization with all grandpas, that was really horrible. It's not easy for me to manage or to behave myself, because it's certain protocol. Not to mention they're from uniforms group, which is a
Yeah.
more protocol add to it.
Yes.
Other than that, I think after so many years, uh, I kind of understand how to carry myself, how to speak, how to behave. Um, because the key, I think, is just open-minded. Yeah, it's not you shouldn't have a what's it predetermined notion of black is like this because you're watching televisions, and
Mm.
Asian is like this because whatever that you read in newspapers, for example.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like this. If you go there, if you come with the open-minded and say, hey, this is not how I do it in my country, then you start having problem with them. They do their way and you do your way, and you have to think and decide whether is that the right way or the wrong way or something that you can follow.
Mm. I sort of get a feeling just from what you were saying that those first few years would have been pretty lonely while you were trying
Yeah,
to sort everything out.
yeah.
So I guess ultimately my aim for having these conversations with people who have managed to do this transition with language and
Mm.
internationally usually is what tips do you have for other people who maybe aspire to work internationally or have just started and are struggling? Um, what what tips can you give people?
I think the very first thing to do is to really understand what you're getting yourself into.
Hmm.
yeah, and then be prepared for it physically and mentally. um you may hear a lot of things. The good things or the bad things about social media is people rarely shares their struggles.
Yeah.
They only
Yeah.
share their success. They only share all the good things, all those selfies with a happy face. But nobody really say, hey, if you were to move to Manchester at this time, the weather is so horrible. You get wet all the time, and you hardly can see sun as you did in Malaysia. Nobody explains this kind of thing. Nobody shares.
Yeah.
People talk about, hey, if you work in the UK and then you make 5 times what you make now, you're gonna be rich. So
Yeah.
that is it could be to a certain extent. It depends on how you live, but um, you have to prepare. You have to understand or know what you're getting yourself into. What other people experience may or may not be the same as yours,
Yeah.
um, because you have different background, different mentality, different perception, different behaviors. It may not work for you. That's one thing. The second thing is you have to be open to anything out there, be
Mm.
international. Because if you, like I said, I grew up in a kampong. If I go back, if I were to go to the US, to the UK, to Germany, with my very small views of what I have in my village, and then you know move farther in your career, and you cannot move farther in your life, because you say, hey, in my village this is not how I do it, therefore I won't do it this way, I do my way. So you will never learn, you never accept that somebody else's way may be better than yours. That is why you're going there, because you want to grow. Well,
Yeah.
if you're going there with a very close minded and then you are the only one right, then it's going to be very challenging. um, then of course the language itself. What my advice to all the Malaysian colleagues here in Malaysia is, you may speak very good Singlish or Manglish and people
Hmm.
understand you very well. When you hear at work, sometimes you can throw a couple of Malay words here and there, people still can pick up what you're saying. But if you go there, you can't do that no more, because first,
Mm.
people don't understand your accent. Second, they may not understand what you mean, because you translate, or you're using whatever your mother tongue is, and you use English as a transliteration, which is may not be understood as well as you want them to understand what you're trying to say. This is hard to do. Obviously, you have to experience it. It grows from there. I don't know whether you can prepare it from home. I don't know. And the other thing is,
I think you can. I think there are strategies, but it takes a bit of.
yeah, the other thing is probably, if you come with the family, yeah, that's the
Mhm.
biggest topic. If the family doesn't like staying in that country,
Yeah.
then your life is going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
This is something that's really difficult to do. Like when I was in Manchester, I said my wife doesn't like it, and then I say, well, let's pack our bag and go home. If you don't like it, there's no point of continue living in this town. Even though it's nice, it's beautiful, but no, it's not what we want to do. Therefore, it doesn't work. Um,
Hmm.
I think
So
that's about it.
maybe just to extend that, you're saying be ready for accepting some failures along the way. And not seeing them as
Exactly.
failures, maybe seeing them
Mhm.
as growth
It,
opportunities.
it- it's a more like a challengers rather than, but it could be, yeah. Say for example, if you come to the Middle East and GCC, people says, oh, you're gonna be working like make a boatload of money, but it turns out you go there, well, GCC is not a good example. Let's say the UK or the or Germany, for example, and people say, oh, you're making euros, and then two Malaysian ringgits multiplied by five, and then they say, oh, you're making 150,000 a year. Then you convert, then your eyes like lit up and saying, hey, you're gonna be rich. But turned out to be 50%, 55% of it is a tax, and 40%
Mhm.
of it is the rent.
Yes.
Then you're gone.
Yeah, cost of
Yeah,
living is never
yeah. Cost of
factored in
living is,
until people land there. That's for
yeah.
sure.
Then yeah. So this kind of information normally is not, you won't believe it until you really experience it. And people rarely share this kind of experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've had some spectacular learnings. I won't call them failures. They were learnings along the way.
Mm,
Um, which I think I put them on LinkedIn. Everyone knows about mine.
yeah.
But I mean that's part of the journey. And if you're not ready
Mm,
for it, then it's very
yeah.
challenging. You're right
Yeah,
in
exactly.
expectations.
Mm.
Excellent. Wow, thank you so much. I'm so pleased that you keep
Oh,
putting
you're
this
welcome.
information on my LinkedIn
Mm,
posts for people to be able to see your
mm,
insights.
mm.
But that you also took the time out to chat with me as well, so that I can
Oh,
share this with
sure.
everyone.
Perfect. Yeah, I like to support you in your posts because I want people to really learn English because only those who understands the power of English itself,
Mm.
like myself, I'm the benefits of English simply because in Malaysia, if you speak perfect English or good English, you are smart.
Yeah,
So
I don't
I'm
like that,
viewed
but
as a
yes,
very smart people, therefore I
yes,
can get a job easily. I
yeah,
can convince my boss. I can shut some people down with my argument because I have a lot of choices of words that I can use
yeah,
to have the effective communication. Um, and then everywhere I go, then people look at me and saying, "Hey, the face looks like stupid, but he's smart." It's a good thing. It's not like it's nothing to waste. You
yeah.
won't go to waste anyway if you learning about the platform to learn it. It's not there's no shortcut to learning it. There is no in the old days they used to have a um something for idiot. You remember that book?
Idiot's Guide to
Idiot's Guide to
whatever.
whatever,
Yeah.
that was I think 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. That kind of book is very famous. Um, but English to me, is it because me? I don't know. Is it because just me that had learning it in a hard way?
No,
I have
well,
no idea.
I don't, I see English. I mean, I've been working internationally with non-native speakers, coaching for decades now, and
Mm,
I see the value of English is in using it. It's not knowledge. It's like anything. You get a degree in engineering, but until
mm,
you've done your graduate time, you don't, it's not
yeah,
a skill yet. It's knowledge,
mm,
it's not a skill. And English is the
mm,
same. You can read all the
yeah,
books in the world and have knowledge,
yeah,
but if you
yeah.
can't use it, it's not a skill yet.
Sure, definitely,
So,
definitely.
um, yeah, I mean that's my personal perspective. Not everyone has that. That's good. And don't want
Sure.
everyone to think like me. Um, but yeah, excellent.
Well, you can tell them. You can tell them is that if you don't develop these skills, even though you have the knowledge, and then
Mm,
you can tell them and say this is where you are right now. If you had a tad more in terms of your language skill, you could have been a lot better than where you are right now.
mm.
It may not work in every country, but obviously it works very well in Malaysia.
I think it works in most countries, honestly. It's the global language of business of industry. Certainly the only language mining industry is done in globally. So
Mm.
um, yeah, it's an important skill, I think. But, mm, thank you again so
All right.
much for
Thank you
taking the
very much.
time.
Sorry to take a lot
Oh,
more
no,
than
no.
you planned for. But
I
yeah,
could talk
I'm
for
having a lot
hours.
of fun talking to you.